Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. Right now, it's all about recapping the Von Miller move to the Buffalo Bills. We've got your full free agency recaps on the big show, the PFF NFL podcast. But let's talk about Von Miller, Sam. Another huge signing for the Bills. I don't want to say it's another huge signing. I thought the Bills had been just shrewd. They'd been making good moves throughout free agency. Things like picking up Roger Saffold, who after he got released by the Tennessee Titans. But now this is their splash move. Von Miller with it's going to be reported as a 6-year, $120 million contract. The reality is it's more like 3 years, $53 million. And look, it's a power move by the Bills for a team trying to keep up in the AFC arms race.
Yeah, not just the AFC. I mean, the entire NFL right now is an arms race. If you're a good team, if you think you're contending in 2022, you better be adding weapons and adding impact playmakers on both sides of the ball because everybody is spooling up for a Super Bowl. Everybody's going on a run. You know, Tom Brady and the Bucs come back, Aaron Rodgers, the AFC West, the entire division is firing up playmakers and looking to contend. And then Buffalo, who was arguably the best team in the NFL last season and, fell 13 seconds short of that game against Kansas City. Buffalo doesn't want to get left behind. So they go and add a guy like Von Miller, who obviously, the best edge rusher of his generation, I would say. Not quite the player that he once was, but showed last season in particular in the playoffs that he's still got plenty of gas in the tank.
And that's the big point there, Sam, because we're a couple years removed from him playing at an elite level until 2021, particularly down the stretch. So there was a point from 2011 through 2018, he did not grade below 90. That is your elite PFF grade, 90 plus in every single season and 90 plus as a pass rusher in almost every season, but very good across the board. Excellent run defender. Everything was good. 2019, we saw a bit of a dip. 2020, he doesn't play. So then 2021, he's kind of, getting back to it. He's not exactly back to his elite self, but then he gets traded to the Rams, further rejuvenated, does finish the season again with that 90-plus grade. So not exactly like, Tom Brady coming back, but similar, right? I mean, he was a couple years removed from an elite grade, and he did it again here in 2021.
Yeah, and critically, a lot of time you see these pass rushers, when they start to age, they lose a lot of elements of their game and they become very one-dimensional. Maybe they don't play the run at all anymore because they're trying so desperately to maintain the pass rush and the speed around the edge that they've had. But Von Miller, like the one thing that never left him was the run defense. That guy has maintained a level at an incredible, as an incredible run defender, and the pass rush has kind of bounced back a little bit. He's not quite the guy that he was as a pass rusher, but he's still good for, 60, 70 pressures in a season, which is an upgrade for Buffalo, right? And they were losing a guy that gave you a lot of pressure. Jerry Hughes has been good for 50 pressures in a season. Von Miller is probably going to bring another 20 over the course of the season and is capable, I think, of higher peaks than Jerry Hughes is at this point in his career. So they're definitely getting better. And Von Miller is a way better run defender than Jerry Hughes has ever been in his career. So across the board, you would say they've managed to upgrade at one of those key positions.
Hey, the run defense part, let's not overlook that, because what have we been saying about the Bills these last couple of years, right? I mean, how many games has that showed up? And usually when you talk about run defense, it's like, all right, well, they got to get bigger. You need more 330-pounders up front. And people are trying to mock draft Jordan Davis to the Bills late first before he exploded at the combine. All viable reasons, right? Or things to do for your run defense. But Von Miller on the edge is a huge asset there. And I think what the Bills have done a great job of the last couple of years is had a 6, 7, 8-man rotation on that defensive line. So maybe Von doesn't have to play have the same workload that he's had in other places. You have the two developmental prospects, Gregory Rousseau and Boogie Basham, that they drafted in the first 2 rounds last year. Rousseau had a really good rookie season. They bring in Daquan Jones on the interior. Ed Oliver heads into year 4. Star Lotulelei still there. AJ Epinesa is still there. Maybe a couple of those guys don't stick around, but on paper, it's looking really deep to go with Von Miller's star power. But I do think the run game component is a key as well, because, yeah, he's a great pass rusher, but the Bills have been gashed against the run in key games in the past.
Yeah, and they did add some size as well, right? Tim Settle came over in a very reasonable, like low level free agent deal, but a guy that just brings size and just ballast against the run up the middle, and that is important because you can't just have guys that are getting blasted off the line of scrimmage with those duo blocks and driven deep off the line, and 5 yards of space is there before anybody can make any kind of play. But you're right, like the idea that a guy like Von Miller, with his quickness and his elusiveness and his ability to just beat blocks and get around people, that guy makes a ton of plays in the run game. And whether he's influencing the play or not, he actually physically makes the stop a lot of the time. He had 45 defensive stops last season. He's been over 50 multiple times in his career, which for an edge rusher is a massive number. It's the plays that you can picture in your mind when you're thinking of Von Miller playing the run, right? It's sort of immediately defeating a block on the edge and then following the running back either away from where he started off or just kind of following him up on his pathway up the middle and making that stop before the guy can get to the line of scrimmage. He is so good at that. And that's a really valuable thing that most edge rushers, certainly most edge rushers of his age, just don't bring with them.
So as far as we talked about this arms race around the NFL, really, particularly in the AFC, where the AFC West is loading up, and just the Bengals are doing a really good job. The Bills are the favorites in the AFC East, but as you've always pointed out on the podcast, it feels like they've been built to beat the Chiefs. And I come back to this Von Miller move, helping to beat the Chiefs, but also helping to beat the Patriots in the division, who like to run the ball. The Dolphins, who are going to have probably a pretty good run game now that they have Mike McDaniel and the Kyle Shanahan tree once they upgrade a little bit on the offensive line, right? This is going to help them in the run game and in the pass game. So it's not just, hey, we got to knock off the Chiefs. Certainly have to do that in the playoffs. But the other teams around the AFC that gave the Bills trouble, the Colts last year, whatever it might be, this does help in multiple ways, the addition of Von Miller.
Yeah, I mean, top to bottom, Buffalo, you could look at for the last few years have done a really good job of building this roster, and not just building it, but maintaining it, right? Keeping, doing small little things, addressing weaknesses when they show up, making sure specific areas don't become weaknesses by the general turnover and attrition rate of a roster year to year. And they're doing the same thing, right? Run defense became an issue for this team, even though I think generally as a philosophy, Buffalo is going to invite teams to run more than a lot of teams, so they're going to look worse as a run defense than a lot of sides if you're just looking at overall yards or even yards per carry. But even by those standards, I think they wanted to get a little bit stronger against the run. And they've done that with guys like Tim Settle, like Von Miller. And then generally, the other key kind of element here is that Buffalo has become a place where free agents want to sign, right? It's becoming a destination. Okay, Buffalo in the winter still kind of sucks, right? Freezing ass cold, snow, wind, all those kinds of things. But you've got Josh Allen, right? That is a draw. You have an organization that looks like it's really well run right now. They're one of those teams that have built like a new kind of performance training center for players as well, which is a draw, right? You don't want to go somewhere where you're training like, on a field somewhere outside the stadium. You want to go where there's a fancy performance center with recovery and, all those kinds of things, right? And the teams that have built those facilities in recent years have become better free agent destinations, better draws because of it. Buffalo's one of them.
All right, so we got to talk risk factor here, though, as well. So the guy that you mentioned, Von Miller, is going to replace, Jerry Hughes, hits free agency. They're about the same age, 33, 1 year difference in draft class. If we're talking 6-year deal on paper, it's really going to be 3 to 4 years of being on the hook of money, probably the way the Bills work it. We're talking 36, 37 years old for Von Miller. I get the idea of going for it. This is your window, Buffalo Bills, right? You've got the pretty good roster in place, but it's just going to come back to bite on the back end.
Yeah, and look, the other thing is, okay, he got back eventually to an 88 pass rushing grade last season. That being said, the thing that got him there was 2 games against 2 catastrophic blocking situations on the right side, right? So the Super Bowl was one of them against Cincinnati, where Isaiah Prince, like the Bengals offensive line, was miserable. We've been talking about that for a while. And then the other one was the divisional round of the playoffs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where, remember, Tristan Wirfs got hurt, right? And immediately that offensive line was a mess from that point on. So those were his two best games. That was 16 pressures across those two games. They were his only two game grades of 90 in the season. They were two of three game grades that were above 80 in terms of pass rush for the season. I think you could probably say that overall, Von Miller is closer to 80 overall or 80 as a pass rusher than he is 90, which is significant, right? It's not the guy that he once was. So you can see that he's declining or has declined. The question is
Sam.
always how quickly that takes hold, right? And how steep the decline and how, like, when is it going to become a problem?
You're interpreting the data the wrong way, Sam. What you described was playoff Von Miller.
Okay.
That's what the Bills got. Yes, look, the contract eventually, it might be too much for them, and he's getting older, but playoff Von Miller goes to the Buffalo Bills. And what amazing things this could do for his already incredible legacy, right? A third Super Bowl ring with a third different team where he was a key component. So we'll see what Von Miller does down the stretch in Buffalo. Huge move again in the AFC.